Servus, hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to check out the video, The Fall of the Roman Empire by History Methods. Yeah, as part of our Roman Empire series where we're going to look at some videos about Rome. I feel like we had some experts here and I really love their style and they have really good information. So I thought we check that out before. Maybe I want to go a bit deeper into the Roman Empire and some of the emperors, where we had like really interesting facts in the total Rome series video. And yeah, but let's just get into this video, guys. I mean, I had some
395 and the Roman Empire has been split in two. This was done by Emperor Theodosius I, known also as Theodosius the Great, because he defeated the Goths and made the official religion of the empire Christianity. He did this in a very clever way, by banning all of the others. The empire's two halves were to be inherited by Theodosius' sons. Arcadius received the eastern half.
I didn't know that Theodosius was one introducing as a Constantine, like we learned.
Constantinople and Honorius received the west, centered at Mediolanum. In case you're wondering, Rome was seen as the spiritual capital of the entire empire, and it's important to note that the empire wasn't officially divided. Those who controlled the two halves saw themselves as joint rurals of a single empire, but realistically they were run as separate entities at this point. As a whole, the empire had a population of about 40 million people and was fairly urbanized. Rome was the largest city and had a population between 350,000 and 500,000, but the east as a whole was much more urbanized. The major urban centers there included the likes of Constantinople, Antioch,
or I think these are the sizes we have in the Middle Ages for the biggest cities, when it was like I think some Spanish cities, Sevilla, no. Cordoba was the biggest city in Europe, as well as like Palermo for a bit of time. Later, of course, Paris and I think London. But they had these numbers like 400,000 people or 300,000 people, which is crazy that Rome had like
Corinth. Feeding the masses of Rome and Constantinople required what was called the grain dole. This was where wheat was imported from the fertile regions of North Africa and Egypt to the cities at great cost to the imperial treasury. This was part of the bread and circuses mantra, whereby feeding and entertaining people meant that they would shut up and not riot. The entertainment was mostly paid for by the wealthy, but after 404 this entertainment would no longer include gladiatorial combat. This was because a monk, Telemachus, tried to stop a fight between gladiators and was promptly murdered. Honorius, moved by this, banned gladiatorial combat because it was un-Christian and apparently not okay to watch people maim each other for our entertainment. So another major expense to the treasury was of course the army, which numbered between 400 and 500,000 men. This was extremely expensive and required an extensive...
Also crazy, because 500,000 man standing army is something that you have like in the modern times as army sizes. I mean, fighting they're spread all over the Mediterranean Roman Empire, but still amazing. And I don't want to know how much that costs the whole empire. And yeah, we see 30%. I mean, 30% is a crazy amount. We have nowadays like the sizes are way bigger, but 2 or 3% of your BP. Yeah, budget and BP is something different. Maybe for the US you have nearly this similar costs. I don't know, but yeah.
Expensive tax system and bureaucracy to make sure the army was paid on time, since if the army wasn't paid on time, they tended to revolt. Both halves of the empire suffered with many problems: corruption, rebellion, financial crises, and perhaps most notably, barbarian invasions. Side note, the term barbarian will be used to describe non-Latin or Greek-speaking peoples who originated from outside of the empire.
Not people being,
there were loads of
like you imagine barbarian, but also just people not coming from the Roman Empire, outside of the Roman Empire,
groups that the Romans had to deal with, but the main ones were the Celts, the Franks, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, and later on, the Huns. The Eastern Empire was wealthier than the West, but had to share a border with the extremely potent Sasanian Empire, meaning that it could never bring its full force to bear lest they face a deadlier invasion. Nominally, the Western Empire was run by Honorius, but the real power lay in a man called Flavius Stilicho, who was born to a Vandal father and a Roman mother. I.e., he was a barbarian, or at least was seen to be by his peers. This was not a rare occurrence, since there were many groups of barbarians that had been allowed to settle within the empire on the condition that they fight for it. The Romans rarely held up their end of the bargain, though. And
basically, for people saying the Goths were the one, there's like the sack of Rome, and people saying were the Goths invading Rome, but actually there were people that they worked for Rome as like you said, mercenary armies, and allowed to live there, and then not got paid or had some conflicts with the center, with Rome, and then started to revolt against Rome, but they were actually invited to the country or the
This led to
the
many
empire, not the
barbarian
country.
groups revolting. The most notable example of this occurred in 378 when the agreement between Fritigern and his Goths and the Roman Emperor Valens wasn't honoured. Fritigern
think this is what
revolted
I
and
meant, yeah.
defeated the Romans at the Battle of Adrianople, in which Valens
No,
was killed.
I'm
Surely
not sure.
after this, though, the Romans would learn to uphold their bargains, but fun fact, no.
Mm.
So a Visigoth called Alaric had been rampaging across the Balkans, and in order to get him to stop, he was given an imperial title and allowed to settle in Illyrica here. He wanted to be closer to Rome, Rome wanted him to not be closer to Rome, and so he decided to compromise in 401, when he raised an army and marched on Rome. He was stopped and defeated by Stilicho, but this invasion did lead to Honorius moving the capital of the Western Empire from Mediolanum to Ravenna, which was more secure. In 406, another invasion, this time led by a Goth called Radagaisus.
Appeasement politic, like giving them what you want, or giving them give them money to not revolt against them, makes them feel like I have power because I can get from the the glorious Roman Empire what I want, so I want more. So it feels like some appeasement politics, which is not
He was
really
also
smart.
defeated by Stilicho, but in order to do so, he had to withdraw troops from the northern border, which in hindsight, not a great idea, because immediately after this in came the Vandals, who flooded into Gaul. Fortunately for Stilicho, things would quiet down after this, by which I mean they would get considerably worse. In 407, a general in Britain declared himself to be the rightful emperor as Constantine III and invaded Gaul. Stilicho was being blamed for all of the previous few years' failings, and him being half Vandal meant that many questioned where his loyalties lie. As such, he was accused of being a traitor, executed, and soon afterwards the Romans slaughtered any of his allies and whatever Vandals they could get their hands on. With Stilicho now a bit on the dead side, things started to get a bit better for the Western Empire. That was a lie, I'm sorry. Alaric made his way back into Italy again and was free to do whatever he wanted. Honorius was getting a bit worried by this point, and so
recognized... Yeah, but all this are like, I feel like this is all like some thematic things, but I wonder what the core problem behind that is. Is it too many like people, like the Vandals, like the Goths from outside trying to get into the empire? Or is it internal struggles like or struggle inside Rome, or I wonder what the real reason behind all these things happened is.
Of course, we really haven't gotten the situation.
In this video.
It didn't. In 410, after his third siege of the city, Alaric took Rome and promptly sacked it. He was a Christian, and so he spared most of the churches, but the city was damaged quite severely. The main damage was to Roman prestige, however, since Rome had remained safe for 800 years. Rome was no longer invincible, and by extension neither was her empire in either the east or the west. After the sack, Alaric went south, where he promptly died, removing at least one major threat from the Romans. It was in this same year that the people of Britannia had complained of their lack of protection from Celtic raids to Honorius. He promptly told them to deal with it. As such, Britannia's place in the empire simply fell away, and it would never again be under Roman rule. In 411, after failing to secure Gaul or defeat the barbarians, Constantine decided this emperor business wasn't for him, and he abdicated, soon after which he died of being murdered. So the West was starting to fall apart at this point, but how was the East doing?
Yeah, but I feel like even though England or Britain is not really part of the Roman Empire anymore, there's still, and like we will see in the whole of Europe actually, still a lot of continuities from Rome, such as Roman commanders ruling there. The Arthur legend is based on probably, I mean, there's like this Arthur movie, which is kind of not that good, but depicting Arthur as being an Roman officer, Roman commander. But probably the remaining Roman authorities, organization, management being there, trying to get rid or stop the, I think what's the Anglo-Saxons coming, or the Saxons in this case, before they came over from invading England. And we'll have that all over Europe, that the structures from Rome remain, the infrastructure, the officials, the people. So just because they're not official part of the Roman Empire anymore, doesn't mean they're from one point to another being completely different than the rest of Rome.
Fine, really. There was no immediate prospect of war with the Persians, and the wealthiest regions of the empire were far away from danger in the south. 408 did see the death of Arcadius and the succession of his son, Theodosius II, though. Back in the west, the Roman army spent the next decade mopping up the remaining bands of barbarians as well as any remaining rebels or usurpers. Much of this was done by allowing the barbarians some semblance of independence, such as when the Visigoths were granted territory here in 418. By 423, the crisis had subsided, and so Honorius celebrated by dying.
I mean, short problem solving, but for the long term, this is how empires fall if they start giving into that. You can have this part of the country, people see you're vulnerable and take advantage of that.
After some arguing, he was succeeded by Valentinian III, Theodosius' nephew. 422 had seen the outbreak of war between the Eastern Empire and the Sasanians, but they agreed to peace after only a year. With all this in mind, it's important to remember that the vast majority of Romans thought the empire was fine. Rome had suffered many civil wars in the past and had also survived the 3rd century crisis, so there was little reason to think that this time would be any different. In the East, this certainly seemed to be the case, since it saw the beginnings of an economic boom which would last until the 6th century. The issues of the barbarians...
the Eastern Roman Empire is fine until the next centuries to come, because I think their center of wealth, of education at this point, becoming the Roman Empire, which Rome has lost the status. But yeah, the Roman Empire, as we know it,
within the Western Empire were growing worse, though, with many groups, notably the Visigoths and the Vandals, demanding more territory. Valentinian III was essentially a puppet to a general named Flavius Aetius, who failed to deal with the barbarians in any meaningful way. In fact, he had to turn to a new group of barbarians to help suppress Rome's enemies, the Huns, led by a certain Attila. The Huns were a nomadic group of people who had been pushing west for several decades at this point, forcing other barbarians...
I remember he's the one, the last emperor of Rome, or official emperor, and of course his name was very ironious because he's named after the founder, the supposed founder, and the first emperor.
...to also head west into the Roman Empire. Aetius made regular use of Hunnic mercenaries to help fight other barbarian groups, which even when it was successful was only so for a short time. Roman success was short-lived, since it was never long until barbarian groups would rise up again in revolt and start taking territory. By the late 430s, the Romans had settled large groups of barbarians in Gaul and Hispania who were also essentially independent, reducing the Western Empire's effective territory to this. Of course, the major change occurred when the Vandals, led by King Genseric, settled in North Africa in the early 430s and in 439 conquered the city of Carthage. This was a major blow to the Western Empire, since the Vandals now controlled the grain supply to Rome and thus could cut it off whenever it suited them. Furthermore, the loss of all of this territory meant that Rome could no longer raise as much tax as it had done previously, and so it couldn't pay its troops. Soon after the fall of Carthage, Aetius raised a large force to retake the city from the Vandals, but this wasn't to be, since the Eastern Empire was then invaded by a massive force of Huns, so these troops had to be recalled. In case you're wondering, both the East and West had attempted to help each other several times before this, such as when the East sent troops to Carthage, but generally speaking, self-interest won out over fraternity. So the Hunnic threat had picked up massively during the 440s, as Attila had united the Huns and subjugated people like the Ostrogoths. Attila's empire looked like this, and in the early 450s he launched a large-scale invasion of the Western Empire. This culminated in the 451 Battle of the Catalaunian Field, which saw Aetius command an army mostly made up of barbarians against the Huns. A colossal amount of people died, and by 453 the Huns had withdrawn from the Western Empire, and it was in this same year that Attila died. His empire subsequently fell into civil war and disintegrated fairly quickly. 454 saw the assassination of Aetius by Valentinian, who...
The result of his empire, I think, now leading to the fall of the Rome as we know it.
The next year was himself assassinated. In the wake of Valentinian's death, the West fell into chaos, which saw more territory lost, and Rome sacked again in 455,
really? Okay,
this time by Genseric. By 457, the emperor was a man called Majorian, who actively sought to reconquer the lost territories within the West.
Normandy.
He had some success with this and recaptured all of this territory with the help of his Magister Militum Ricimer. Ricimer would have Majorian assassinated and would then rule the Western Empire as Stilicho had through a series of imperial puppets until his death in 472. There were some more weak emperors in the West until a man called Orestes took control of it and named his son emperor as Romulus Augustus, although he's better known as Augustulus, which means Little Augustus. Both of these were soon chased off in 476 by a man called Odoacer, who forced Romulus to abdicate, leaving the imperial throne vacant in the West. This is with the exception of the former emperor Julius Nepos, who claimed it but had no authority. This is, by many historians, considered to be the final end of the Western Roman Empire. In the void it left were many new kingdoms, including the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Franks, and now in Italy the kingdom of Odoacer, which pledged its allegiance to the Eastern Emperor Zeno. Zeno would of course have other plans and tasked the Ostrogothic king
we have
Theodoric.
a lot of these. For example, the Franks gonna be the dominating force of Middle Europe for the next years to come, or will grow to that. I don't know really about the Vandals, if they are around for much longer, because I know them from this time period, but after that, from the early Middle Ages, I don't really know about the Vandals. So maybe their empire, kingdom / I don't know what it is, but will probably not last that long anymore.
To retake Italy as the Eastern Empire's representative, which he would do by 493. So the Roman Empire in the west was now gone, Rome lay in ruins, and the city wouldn't really recover until the 19th century. Whilst Rome had fallen, the Roman Empire had not, and in the east it stood as strong as ever. What remained was a highly urbanized empire which would dominate the eastern Mediterranean and would continue to do so for another 2 centuries. With hindsight, it's easy to look at what happened in the West and assume that it was inevitable. Rome had survived many great problems before, but this time it was many weaknesses combined which led to its ultimate collapse in the West. Whilst the Roman Empire had disappeared from Western Europe, her legacy would endure and would be something republics and monarchies alike would aspire to be over the next millennia, or 2. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And
okay, like I said, like from many historians considered official end of Rome, but for the people, I think most partly they don't really recognize something was different. Besides, maybe they heard of that that the Roman Empire is not anymore, but it was like a process over decades / centuries, and what read like a rapid downfall on paper is like people knew something was wrong with the empire, didn't feel maybe for a long time anymore as Romans. And something other that I mentioned in the long video is that Rome actually, for the people, or especially for the kings, hadn't fallen because the Roman Empire had to survive, or else the world was going to end. Especially beginning of the 10th, 11th century, this belief was strongly picked up, and people that considered themselves, or Charlemagne, it started Roman Empire again, because of the Christian. I think in the Bible there's a story about 4 empires, and after these 4 empires, the world is gonna end, and there will be the end of the world basically. And then the Roman Empire was the 4th one, so it had to survive, and people considered themselves emperors of the Roman Empire. I mean, by name, basically until 1805, when Napoleon destroyed the Holy Roman Empire. But people believed they were Roman empires actually in the Middle Ages, which many people don't probably know, not only by name but also by tradition. But yeah, great video as always from History Matters. A lot of name dropping, which I'm not that much a fan, because I will forget probably half of that, but still very interesting. Yeah, thanks you guys for watching. If you like, please leave a like, and I hope I see you in the next video, guys. Goodbye, you guys.